Well, now to news coming in from Kenya, where the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi has called for provocateurs behind protests in the capital to be held accountable. Well, that comes as the High Court in the East African country suspends a bill banning Kenyan youth protests in Nairobi after demonstrations there resulted in deaths and brought widespread destruction. All right, let's cross live now to Paul Mwangi, Chief Legal Counsel for Azimio Party and representing Raila Odinga. Mr. Mwangi, great to have you on the program. As I mentioned there, the U.S. Embassy in Kenya has just issued a statement saying that provocateurs and opportunists behind the protests should be held accountable. What's your take on this narrative coming from the U.S.?
First, it's very clear that this is a government narrative, and this is a narrative they have taken from the government. The issue of there being provocateurs in these protests has been a very contested issue. And the evidence that has come from the media is that most of these provocateurs have been sponsored by the government itself. So my reading to see the American embassy adopt the narrative and the language of the government in describing what is going on the streets is, I think, they intend to give the government some license into breaking up the continuing protests. And clearly they intend to close their eyes to some extreme measures that they wish the government to adopt to break this up.
The Kenyan High Court has suspended that decision to ban protests in its capital, Nairobi. The protests resulted in violence and destruction to the city, and we saw people die as well. With that in mind, were police right to push for this ban?
First, the people who have died are people who have been shot by the police, and they have not died because they were attacked by their fellow citizens. It is the people who were shot and or tear gassed or hit with tear gas canisters directly from the police. Those are the casualties that we have. So the government is the one that has put the narrative that there is violence. But what we have seen is that every time the police have not interfered with the protesters, the protests have gone on very peacefully. And sometimes these protests have gone into the night. We have had protesters in town wait till midnight without any breakages, without any riots, and they have peacefully gone home. And this has only been seen when the police have decided to break up and to prevent any protests from going on.
So do you expect the protests to continue now that the ban has been suspended?
First, yes, even without the ban being suspended, the protesters had said that they will continue to go on. The new constitutional dispensation that we have since the Constitution 2010 is that you do not need the permission of the police to exercise your rights. And that is what the High Court re-emphasized today, that people have the right to assemble under Article 37, and all they may need to do is, what they need to do is inform the police that they're going to be holding the protests, but they do not need the permission from the police, and the Constitution is clear that rights are not granted by the state. It is for the state to recognize and protect them.
These protests kicked off after President Ruto's government pushed for tax hikes in order to pay off IMF debt. So the people's anger is understandable, but how else can the government save the economy?
The reason why the finance bill brought such animosity from the people, and this started way back to the finance bill of last year, is because the government itself is not employing any austerity measures. So on one hand, we have a government that is very excessive in the way it is, very extravagant in the way it is using taxpayers' money, but at the same time, then seeking to raise more money to pay the debts by taxing people. What people have demanded to see is some form of austerity measures, the government itself to tighten its belts, to drop all unnecessary expenditures. But as the tax hikes are going on, there have been complaints that the entire cabinet is always in the air, that the president is always flying in and out of the country. Unnecessary offices have been created, taxpayers' money have been thrown into these offices, and for them to resort to taxing people rather than tighten their beds is what has caused this anger.
President Ruto has halted the finance bill, so in that regard, he has listened to the protesters. But what other steps has he taken, or what other steps do you wish for him to take, considering the Kenyan economy is still at stake?
One of the things that he did as he broke up the cabinet is that he abolished the offices of the first lady and the second lady, that is office of the wife to the deputy president, and the office of the wife to the prime cabinet secretary. Those had all were consuming about 1.3 billion shillings. That has been scrapped, but people want more. People want to see more austerity measures in terms of identifying all unnecessary expenditures and having them scrapped. And I think if they did that and people honestly saw that we are now running with a lean government that has employed the necessary austerity measures, then people might then agree to have taxes raised to meet any deficit. But I do not think people will agree to have any taxes raised so long as it is clear that the government is being extravagant in the expenditure and spending of taxpayers' money.
Mm-hmm. So what is it that the protesters are looking for now after President Ruto withdrew the finance bill? What will appease these protesters?
The protesters are the young generation. They're worried about the country that they are going to be living in and the country that they are going to inherit. They want to see reforms that reflect what their concerns are. They want to see a promise that tribalism is over, nepotism is over, corruption is over, and extravagance is over. And that's going to take very wide reform measures from the government. So far, the government has just scratched the surface in terms of delivering what the protesters are demanding. And how it will unfold in the future, I think, will be how convinced the protesters are about how genuine the government is in addressing their concerns.
Another issue that's been controversial with the Kenyan public is Kenya sending troops to Haiti at the United States bidding. What's your thought on that? Should they have sent troops to Haiti?
No, the contradiction is that we have a state of insecurity in very many parts of the country. And people found it ironical that we would be so bothered about going to restore peace in Haiti while places like Baringo County in Kenya, schools even closed down because of the levels of insecurity in those areas. So people believe that the only reason we sent troops to Haiti is because we were getting paid for it, and that because America had asked us to do it, and therefore the government is not prioritizing the concerns of its own citizens, but more interested in bolstering its international image.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Paul Mwangi, Chief Legal Counsel for the Azimio Party and Raila Odinga's lawyer. Mr. Mwangi, thank you for your time.
Thank you.